One size fits all seems like a good idea for clothes until you try them on. Same goes for healthcare. That's why United Healthcare offers flexible, budget-friendly coverage for medical, vision, dental, and more. Learn more at uh1.com.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hello, welcome to this. It is the EggChasers Rugby podcast, but the Eggonomics version. As always, it's brought to you by Beardmore & Co, independent financial advisors, and if you can't tell by the name, that is me, offering you independent financial advice, pensions, investments, protection, financial planning, all that good stuff. Now, it would be remiss of me to get on a podcast and not mention Tim Cocker's excellent YouTube channel over at EggChasers, but also what I would consider one of the most exciting projects in all of rugby at the moment on YouTube, FR UK Rugby, which is all about French rugby for a UK audience. It is awesome and it's only going to get better. So check out Tim there. Right. As always, I am joined by the great Mark Evans. Mark, in case you haven't been listening for the last 4 or 5 episodes, is the ex-CEO of Harlequins, formerly of Saracens, but now he is applying his trade over in Fiji with Fiji Drura. Mark, how are you? Mark, how are you?
All right. Yeah, not bad, to be honest. Had a good win at the weekend. Ended up in the finals again, which is, pleasing.
Have you made the finals every year so far?
No, didn't make them in year one. We only won 2 games in year one, but I'm going to claim I wasn't there. Therefore, I'm not being held responsible for that. No, to be fair, in year one, they hardly played on the island because of COVID. Played most of the games out of Australia, got flooded out of their training centre. It was a tough year.
Yeah.
But character forming, they tell me. So there we are.
Exactly. And are you in a position to reflect on the year yet, or do you not want to do that until the playoffs are over?
No, well, I think to a degree. I mean, obviously we've got a tough game this week. 7 plays 2 away at 2, which is the Blues, who I think are the best team in the comp. Mm-hmm. They had a brainstorm and conceded a soft try in the 79th minute of the last game, which lost them the number 1 slot, which loses you home advantage in the final if you get there, which is a big thing. So they're kicking themselves, I expect. But the 2 best teams are at the top. The Hurricanes and the Blues are the 2 best teams this year. I think there's a little bit of a distance between them and the others. Tough away, but it's good experience, and it's good to get into the finals again. I think if we hadn't, that would have taken a little bit of momentum away from us. Whereas, we've had a few, as teams do. I mean, all teams have got their things that went wrong, and we didn't have a half-backs at all. We lost our starting 10, didn't play again. Well, no, he played. He actually came on second half last week, the first game. And Frank Lamani got banned for half the tournament, who's, our starting 9. So,
yep.
These things happen. You've got to look at it in a little bit more bigger picture than that. But no, it was okay. It was par. It's the big difference in this comp is if you can run top 4. And we're still a little way away from that, I think, to be fair. So that's when you get a home playoff, and as we saw yet again in England over the weekend.
Yeah, it really matters.
Not many teams win away in a playoff. It's very hard.
Well, we might talk about playoffs if you have enough time later. But presumably, you're already looking at building your squad for next year. These things are done in advance.
26, really, JB. We've done 25, pretty much.
So you're looking at 26 now.
If you're building your squad for 25 at the moment, you're in trouble, in my view. We have got a couple of slots left, but literally 2 out of 38. I mean, it's down to that view now.
Well, here's the thing.
You shouldn't be.
Go on, sorry.
You shouldn't be doing it unless you're having a complete clean out and rebuild. You shouldn't really be still very active in the market at the moment. By this stage, you should have done your business.
Okay, well, talking about markets, something sort of came across my mind the other day, which is quite a lot of, how can we say, poachers become gamekeepers in rugby. So I think Rob Burgess is head of recruitment at Bath. The general manager at Leicester Tigers is Richard Wilkes, who was an ex-agent. And prior to him was Simon Cohen, who was an ex-agent. You've done all the jobs in rugby. I was wondering, have you ever considered some sort of advisory role or agency role? And generally speaking, what do you think of the agency market at the moment?
Cool, there's a lot of questions. Oh, by the way, Simon Cohen would like to be called a lawyer, not an agent.
He's a legal eagle.
Yes, indeed. Is there a role? Yes, there's undoubtedly a role for agents. In most professional sports, they are the classic intermediary, aren't they, between the buyer and the seller and buyer of labour. I think that it has, in my time in the game, which is too long really, their role has changed. What's changed since the Wild West days? I mean, the late 90s, when the game went pro, it was a bit like the Wild West. There were hundreds of agents.
Really? So let's just go back to that. Let's just start there then. So back in the day, what would be the sort of profile of the guys who would be representing players that be walking through your office?
Well, not much walking through offices. They're mostly done on the phone in those days, and now online. Honestly, everybody saw an opportunity. It's like any new market. Suddenly rugby went pro, and there were all kinds of people claiming to represent players. And it was a very, very disaggregated market. So there were people started with some of the guys who went on to be very successful. I remember some of friends, Nick Keller, who has, created Benchmark Sport and Sports Industry Awards and created a hell of a business. I remember him representing Will Greenwood because they went to university together.
Huh.
And then he knew Nigel Ray because they were both old Mill Hillians of different eras. And therefore he picked up Tony Diprose and Richard Hill. And suddenly, and Nick, who's a very clever man, and I should disclose in interest of a close friend, saw it as a means to an end. He was never going to stay as an agent. He realised very early on, and this is one of the big changes, that if you were ever going to make money out of rugby agency, you had to have a presence in all the rugby markets.
That's interesting.
The agency market, you had to have people in France, people in Japan, people in Australia, So first of all, you got partnerships, people partnering up in from different markets, and so because if you're going to go in and talk to it's all about personal relationships. A lot of it is anyway, and trust. So it's quite hard to trust a person from South Africa you've never met, particularly when before Zoom and Skype and what have you. Showing my age with Skype there, aren't I? It was tricky, and then it took so that's what started, and then you got beyond that. You got the consolidation where the bigger ones started swallowing up the little ones, which happened in lots of markets, as I'm sure you know. And then you got also then some of the big global sports agents like Wasserman and people like that started buying rugby divisions or setting up rugby divisions, to the point now that apart from in some niche markets, and there'll always be a role for the very sort of boutique-y type agents with a small number of clients. I mean, Tim Buttermore, I suppose, same era as me from playing, good player, Tim. England A, Coventry, when they were good. I mean, Johnny Wilkinson was pretty much his only client.
Really?
He didn't need anyone else, did he? Didn't need anyone else.
No.
Johnny had more money than the rest of the league put together. And that's the agency. He was one of the very, very few players, then or now actually, in rugby. There are a very, very small number, but not many, who earn more off the park than they do on it. Now, whereas that's very common in tennis and very common in golf and very common in the American sports. Is it Caitlin Clark, isn't that American woman basketball player who gets a tiny salary because women basketball players don't get paid much in the States, but earns a very large amount of money out of college.
So this is really interesting. This is really interesting, actually, because I think it's a great barometer to where rugby is. There's a lot of players that we would consider, either or, I guess, because there's a lot of players that I would consider big names who have left an agent, sort of looking for more commercial deals, and they just don't exist. Like people, you might get a car, you might get some boots, but really the commercial deals for rugby players are not out there in the same way they are as for tennis players, or as you mentioned then.
Nowhere near. There's no. Well, the sport is smaller. It's not global, so there's no scaling really. There's players who do transcend the sport. What does that mean? Well, that means, does the average Joe in the street or Joanna know the player?
No. And I tell you where this is most. I'll tell you where this is most prevalent, Mark, is in the media realm. Because if you want to set up a media, some sort of media presence now with a mainstream media outlet, you need a name, and all the names are the same names that have been going around for a long time, whether it be Brian Moore or it be Martin Johnson. But tellingly, it's nobody really from the current era or the era just past. Like nobody can get any traction.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? There's in certain localized markets, certain rugby players do transcend the sport. So Dan Carter, transcended the sport in New Zealand. Richie McCaw transcended the sport in New Zealand. Jonah Lomu was, I suppose, the first rugby player who genuinely had a global or that's not maybe not global, an international presence. And of course, in lots of other sports, the role of the agent is largely to negotiate commercial transactions on behalf of their client.
Yeah.
In rugby, and interesting enough, of course, rugby is more like football, but much, much, much smaller. And without the merchandising element that a lot of the football deals bring. So most rugby agents or agencies really make their money from taking a percentage of the salary that they negotiate on behalf of the player.
Yes.
Now, whether they get that from the club or whether they get that from the player, and by the way, another mistake that was made early on, England still may have changed quite a bit since I was involved directly, but the club always used to pick up the agent's fees, which was nuts because they're not representing the club, they're representing the player. So there was two
ways to do this, wasn't there? I don't know if the ways still exist, but yes, you're right. The club would pay the player, which is a direct conflict because, of course, the agent is supposed to be representing the player. And I think this causes some problems because a lot of players might rightly say, is your representation really worth 10% of my salary or 5% of my salary? Am I really earning more because you're here? And I think that's a fair question. And it's not just about money, because a good agent, and I'm not anti-agent by any means, and I certainly do think most of the untrustworthy ones, and my word, there were some back in the day, got weeded out pretty damn quick. Yes.
Once you've been let down once, you certainly didn't deal with that guy again, and therefore you weren't interested in his players. And therefore the players worked it out that actually, maybe I'm with the wrong guy.
Yeah.
So that bit got weeded out pretty quickly, and then the consolidation came. But is there value? Yes, there is. There's particular value to the player if you want to move.
Yes. Well, the way that agents would get paid by the clubs, which is the second part of what I was about to say, is
not normally.
No. But the way they do it is they would ask for the agent to do a scouting or a headhunting, and that's how they get around. Yeah,
that's how they used to get around the cap. Actually, that's how they used to get. One of the ways used to get around the cap, because agents' fees are meant if you pay them, go into the cap. I don't know if it's still the case, but used to go into the cap. So clubs didn't like that, so they found ways of saying, "Oh, he's not an agent; he's a scout." The scouting arrangements were outside the cap. I'm talking to you, Steve Diamond, and others. And it was a moot point, and without we're diverting slightly, and without huge investigatory powers and resources on behalf of the salary cap auditor, that was quite hard to pick up.
Yes.
Anyway, why are they worth it? Well, because if you're a player and a good agent knows where the gaps are, to put it simply. A good agent has pretty decent relationships with a large number of clubs in several markets, or his company do, because they've all constituted. So they'll know which positions each Japanese club is looking for. They'll know how many non-GIF places each French team has got available. They'll know who's on the move, and therefore what opportunities may well open up, because they lose information that they glean from one deal to think, well, that might create an opportunity for another of my clients. So, now, that's all very powerful and valuable information the player can't possibly have access to.
Yes.
Also, if you don't have I'll come to when I don't think you need an agent in a minute.
Okay.
But all the other things that agents protect from are people like me.
Yes.
Who've been doing it for quite a long while and think they know something about value, and basically are trying to get as much value out of every deal as they can.
Yeah.
So that's an asymmetric relationship between me and a 19-year-old fullback. I mean, that's just not a fair and equitable negotiation.
So can I just add?
There is a role for agents. Can
I just add to that a second? So I kind of was of the naive impression once upon a time that just do your own deal. How hard can it be? But there again, I'm in an industry where I do negotiate, and I am in the services business.
And you're not 19, and you're not.
And I'm not 19. Yeah. Now, the two guys that I have had the most dealings with at that kind of level in rugby is Steve Diamond and Simon Orange. It didn't take me many meetings before I realised that if you were a 19-year-old, in fact, if you're an agent going into a room with those two guys, you better be bloody well prepared and willing to fight your ground, because you're going to lose. You're going to lose 9 times out of 10 as a player, and probably 5 times out of 10 as an agent if you're not good. Probably more than that.
The good ones are very well informed, and they are quite experienced, and they know most of the negotiating ploys. So, in answer to your first question, do they add value? For a player who's looking to move or even just test the market, I mean, often a player will say to an agent, well, I don't really want to move, but can you just test the market for me? Now, the player can't do that. The player just can't do that. He has to have a representative to do that for him, or occasionally her. But of course, those of us who are on the other side, on the buying, and we sell or cut players too, or don't renew, or whatever you want to call it. But we're when we're in buying mode, we know agents come along and they're just testing the market. You know they are, and they say, well, what would you be prepared to give him? And I always say, I'm not prepared to make an offer until I know he wants to come in.
Really? Was that your stance?
Often, yeah. Or I'd say, well, what's he on at the minute? And I would sometimes know what he was on at the minute.
Oh, that's interesting. So, Helen, what would be your stance if you knew you were being misled then? Fair game or not trustworthy?
Yeah, that's fair enough. If I was on the other side of the aisle, I might be looking to push it up a couple of notches and take a chance that that I wasn't as well informed. And sometimes you're not.
Got to say, that's a very charitable.
The time I don't think a player needs an agent is this, and this, I think I've told this story before, so But it's if a player doesn't really want to move and is perfectly happy at the club they're at, and so is their partner, if they have one, and their children, if they have any, and they don't want to move schools, and they don't want to move house, and they really don't want to, but they want fair value. They want to feel they're getting a decent deal. They'll probably take unders, as in that horrible phrase. They'll probably accept a little bit less than what they could get on the open market.
Yeah.
For one or two reasons. One, there's a cost to moving and there's a risk to moving. If you're at a club where you're quite happy, you like the coach, you're getting a lot of minutes, you feel you're getting a fair run, and your family are happy, you'll probably take a bit less than your market value to stay because the risk is zero. Alternatively, that's one reason. The other reason you'll take unders is only in a salary cap environment.
Yeah.
If you genuinely think your team is close to winning stuff or is going to continue to win stuff, and you know that you're at a club that does not breach the cap, you'll sometimes take unders to keep the team or the group together.
Yes. Now,
and sometimes you can say to a player, look, we're going well, but look, we got these 3 19-year-olds. I've got to upgrade them. I don't really want to break the team up. Will you go 20 or 30 or 40,000 under?
Now, you've had this experience at Harlequins, have you not? I think you mentioned it
last... I've had the experience. I've had the experience everywhere. We still have it now at the Drua, whereby players will sometimes stay for quite a bit less than they could get in another market, because there's a whole lot of non-monetary things that you need to weigh up.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of examples of they know Fijian players who've gone overseas and it hasn't worked out, even though the money was quite good. They've been unhappy and they've been lonely and they've been quite isolated and there's been problems with the language and the lack of sort of family and all that kind of stuff. It all needs to be weighed up, and they get surprised by the tax rate and they get surprised by the cost of living, and suddenly, so player, it's quite and agents also are, if they're any good, do tend to try and find clubs where they think their player will thrive, because of course that's in their interest. They do not want to go, they don't want to send a player to a club where they think his playing style doesn't suit that coach or that team, because the player then is likely not to play. And if the player doesn't play in 3 years' time, his value will have fallen through the floor.
Mm. Yeah. And
so that doesn't suit the agent, because if they're on a percentage, they're now going to get a percentage of a smaller number. A decent agent, for example, I know a lot of agents who do this, for instance, will say, I take nothing off the first deal of an 18-year-old, zero. I'll probably take nothing off the second deal when they're 20 or 21. And then I take a bit of, and then I start taking it at 24. So I know agents who take nothing for 6 years.
Yeah.
To try and build, and sometimes the players aren't angels. I've known agents who've done that for 6 years, and just as they're coming up to some kind of return, the player flips and goes somewhere else. Yeah,
well, players are very impressionable. That's the other thing as well, and they do tend to listen to the last person that they spoke to.
Well, I wouldn't dream of generalising about all players, JB, but I understand what you're saying. I think that sometimes, it's quite hard for players to know who to choose as an agent as well.
It's phenomenally difficult.
That decision?
Yeah, it's the same as picking any professional, isn't it? How do you know you got the right accountant if you're not an accountant?
Dentist. How do you know they're any good?
Yeah,
it's difficult.
In fact, that's a really good question, actually. How would you advise a player to screen an agent?
I'd say two things. I'd say, ask yourself this question and answer it honestly. Do you trust him or her?
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one. And secondly, I'd say try and get another few players to recommend somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's almost the danger, isn't it? Because you get this locker. I see it with, and I'm not trashing anyone here at all.
No.
But I see it with certain investment advisors. So an ex-player will become, say, a member of St. James's Place, and before you know it, they'll snap up five or six players out of nowhere, and then they won't all. Some will stay, some will go. But it's same when they sell insurance, or same when they sell anything. Getting the recommendations from the players isn't. I think I'd rather get a recommendation from the director of rugby of who he least likes to deal with.
No, I don't think you would. Actually.
Or most like to deal with.
I come back to I would refer you back to my first part of my answer when I said number one. I'd say, do you trust?
Yeah,
because you're not. And that's what you ask the players. You say, other players. You say, "Can I trust them?"
Yeah, maybe the senior players.
Well, of course, a lot of players, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. I've known players, and certainly happens in football quite a lot, who have their brother as their agent.
Yeah,
or their father.
Yeah, very common, but not necessarily a good model, though, is it?
No, not necessarily. And certainly for the sort of 17, 18, 19-year-olds coming out of... Because the competition for players at 15, 16, 17 is ferocious.
Is it?
Amongst agents.
Even at rugby?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because people... I've said players change agents, and they do. But a lot don't.
Mm.
And from the agent's point of view, they're always trying to have a lifetime relationship or a career-long relationship with the player. Because obviously you might do 5 contracts, you might do 6.
Mm.
What the player then, as they get older, they early on it's quite easy, and certainly with quite a lot of clubs back in the day, and I don't know, we still do it at the Druid, I don't know if many still do it at Premiership. We don't have any negotiation for the academy. We just have a set salary.
So you're in or you're out, and that's it. If you want to leave, you can leave.
Take it or leave it. Yeah, we've got 10 places. It's so much each. You're all on the same. If you don't want it, go somewhere else.
And you would never, ever break that, no matter who you had?
I like this story. I hope I haven't told this one before. I tell lots, like everyone else. I tell a lot of the same stories, but to different audiences, hopefully. When we set it up at Sarries back in right at the dawn of professionalism, when we had I think we were the first team to set up we called them apprenticeships then, but would now be called academies.
Yeah.
And it was like shooting fish in a barrel, because nobody else was doing it. And I used to spend a day a week when I wasn't coaching or, trying to sign senior players. I'd spend a day a week looking at young players and bringing people up and all the rest of it. So we signed people from all over the country, from David Flatman to Matt Cairns to Ben Johnson, who went on to play for England. It was so easy. I remember having a conversation with Steve Borthwick, but he was clever and he wanted to study. I can't remember what he wanted to study, but it was something quite, high powered. And I think the only places that did it near where he said, I can come to the University of Surrey. I said, mate, you've never been to London, have you? He said, yes, I said, not very often. I said, do you know how far away that is from us? I think Guildford. We're in Barnet. No, go to Bath. There we are. It was like that back in those days. Go to Bath. They do they're the university could do the course, and Anyway, they were on year 1 apprenticeships were on £6,000, and year 2 were on 8. Now this is 1996.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month slows. Full terms at mintmobile.com.
A lot can happen in 3 years, like a chatbot may be your new best friend. But what won't change? Needing health insurance. United Healthcare Tri-Term Medical Plans, underwritten by Golden Rule Insurance Company, offer flexible, budget-friendly coverage that lasts nearly 3 years in some states. Learn more at uh1.com.
Right, okay.
Okay.
That's a lot of money, actually. I was going to say that's not much money at all. That is actually a lot of money. 996.
My argument to the parents, because we used to obviously bring the parents in, was, look, most of it, not all of them, I said, but, if they don't come to us, they'll probably go to college and they won't earn anything. And this is no guarantee. Why don't you look at this as a gap year? We'll pay them 6,000 quid, take them on in the second year. It was our option for 8. And if they do well, then we'll put them into the main squad. And if they don't, then we won't take them up and they can go off to university a year or two late. Where's the risk? That's how I used to sell it.
Yeah.
And I can remember in about the second year going after 2 kids from the Midlands because, as I say, nobody else was doing it. The next club that started to do it was Richmond under John Kingston. And they started, I remember us fighting over Andrew Sheridan. And they won that, which is, I wouldn't break my 6 and 8 thing, I seem to remember. And I remember we went chasing Andy Good and another guy. And was it Adam Balding? Might have been. Anyway, I think it was. And Goody, bless him, said, I want 8 and 10. And I said, no, we're all on the same. I'm not breaking it for you. You go somewhere else. He said, well, in that case, I will.
Did he? Good lad.
Yes, he did.
I'd give him 8 and 10 for backing himself. I'd say no to him, and if he said, right, I'm going, I'd give him his 8 and 10.
And I knew he was a good player. He was from Coventry, you see, neither were our local club, and he went to Leicester Tigers. He ended up at Saracens eventually, of course.
He did.
I wouldn't break it, and we kept to that. We changed the numbers. When I got to Quins, I think it was, by then it was 18 and 20, something like that.
Okay.
Same sort of thing, no, and we did not move that for anybody. It didn't matter who the player was. We sometimes, and I still use that system at Drua. So this year we had a boy who came into development on whatever our development money is, but it's not a huge amount.
Mm-hmm.
And we broke into the contract after 6 weeks.
You broke into it. So when you say you broke into it, you increased it or you got rid of the player? Sorry.
We broke into it. So you're going up to the main squad, you're on $50,000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
After 6 weeks.
Because you knew it.
Exactly.
So, right. Okay. So that's kind of what I was going to ask next. If I bought you the next Fijian Marcus Smith, are you going to stick to your guns?
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because you've got to think about culture.
Yep.
And you've got to think about players talk all the time. They all know what each other's on. Right? They all share their salary. So don't think you're ever going to give a player a contract and he's not going to tell his mates, because he will.
Yeah.
Well, even if they don't all, lots of them do, because they're friends and they.
And you want them to be friends, actually.
And all that. So you always have to be mindful when you're doing it on the club side. Right, what I offer this guy, if we do a deal, I've got to assume that the other players will find out what the number is.
Yeah. Which kind of begs the question why you don't just tell everyone anyway.
Well, don't get me wrong.
I mean, I know you would league-wide, but, it does make...
I would make the salaries public.
Yeah.
I would, yeah.
As would I. So who gives you the most...
I think it's a great talking point, and it also holds people like me accountable for value.
Yes, I agree.
They've offered him how much?
Well, yeah.
They're paying him how much? And I just think it's really... I think fans
it's interesting,
find
isn't
really
it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And anyway, people say to me, well, that's not fair. Privacy. I said, well, my salary's been in the public domain for years.
Yeah, exactly right.
Because I was a director at Harlequins, and I was the only executive director. My salary was in the annual accounts.
Just a quick one. Who gave you more problems when signing young players? Parents or agents?
No, never really too much problem signing young players. Occasionally used to lose one to a competitor, but and actually that's one of the things English rugby did get right back in the day. For a while it got, after having shooting fish in the barrel around about 96, 97, hardly any competition. By about 2000, it was ferociously competitive.
Really?
And salaries for promising young players just skyrocketed. And clubs were bidding against each other, and agents were leveraging the competitive tension. And I, with a number of other people, said, this is just nuts. We're spending too much on the senior players. We're now spending too much on the kids, half of whom will never make it. Well, what are we doing? So that's where the academy areas came from. And there was a sort of no poaching agreement, which was honoured more in the observers than the breach, to be fair. There weren't too many people who tried to skirt around it. There was always a bit of thing about where do you count where he's from? Is it where he goes, if he's a boarder, if he goes to school, or where he lives?
Yeah.
What about his parents are split up and he spends some time with mum and some time with dad, and they live 150 miles apart? Is he a Bath area or is he a London Irish area? There were all difficulties like that. But it did, hearing what you've heard me say so many times, by regulating it, the costs were controlled.
Well, just on the regulation, of course I wanted to talk to you about regulation because I know you love it. Agents now, there is some regulation. Would you increase that regulation? Would you decrease it? What would you like to see from a regulator around agencies or agents?
I think the regulation of agents in the UK isn't bad at all.
Okay.
And I think that's not where I would increase the regulation. And it has got better in England, by the way, this as well. It used to be awful. It's now okay-ish. Yeah,
so just so listeners know, if you want to be an agent in England, you've got to apply to the RFU and you've got to do a test. And apparently it's not particularly easy. In fact...
no, it's not.
I did apply for that test.
Quite right. Because it used to be one of these things you didn't have any kind of qualification or oversight or anything. Anybody could just jack up and I'm representing Johnny. Oh,
yeah, you can. Okay, I think, unless things have changed, you can actually go on the RFU website and get a list of every single agent and their phone numbers on the RFU website, which I think is quite cool, actually.
Yes, you can. So, I mean, I'm not. I mean, maybe I'm unusual in many ways, but not in a good way. But I've always had a lot of time for agents. I mean, look, the guy I went to Melbourne with, and I went with him rather than him going with me, who was my chairman then and the majority shareholder of the Storm, and I was his chief exec. We met when I was DOR at Quins and he was an agent in the UK.
Okay.
That's how we met. Now, he didn't stay, a bit like Nick Keller, who I referenced earlier. He didn't stay an agent for very long, you can imagine. Although he did. He ran quite a big rugby agency globally for a little while, called CSN. So he ended up on the board at World Rugby and New Zealand Rugby and chairman and largest shareholder in Melbourne Storm. And he was an agent.
I see.
He was a very clever guy, and still is a very clever guy. So, they're like any other area. You've got some very good ones and some very able people doing it, and you've got people who are neither of those things and everything in between.
Do you know, the thing I'd like to see agents responsible for, because I do think they struggle to deliver value in a salary cap situation, particularly if you're aspiring to be an English player, you've got limited options.
Value to who?
To the player. So, if your aspirations...
Demonstrate why you think that might be the case.
Because if you're an aspiring English player, and you're dealing with individuals like yourself, and you've got a strict salary structure, You either fit into it or you don't. And kind of same with the Welsh regions. They're like, okay, here is your salary structure. Do you fit the criteria? You get this, or you can go elsewhere. And the weapon they have behind them is the national team. So, okay, fine. I think that, therefore, that one of the things agents should be responsible for, just to add a little bit of, things that they do, is declaring the player's salary to the salary cap manager. So I think there should be a declaration by every player what you earn. And as long as you're honest on that, you're free from all sanctions for financial doping. But if you want to hand it off to your agent, that's absolutely fine. The agent has to be responsible then for saying, these are all the things that the club has done for my player. These are the values of them, and then hand them in. I just think that's a little thing they can do. It's a professional thing. It's something players don't need to be worried about, and it helps enforce the salary cap.
Well, the club should do that.
Yeah, but it's to catch the clubs out, isn't it?
No.
It's a check and a balance.
The clubs. Listen, the agents cannot break the salary cap without the clubs agreeing.
No. What I'm trying to say is when Saracens had their salary cap investigation, all the players were saying, oh, well, we didn't know, how were we meant to know? So what my system would do is the clubs would declare one number of what they'd spent, and then what you do is you get all of the declarations from the players and see if those numbers add up. And if they don't add up, then you get investigated.
I can't remember. It's been too long to know what the players have to sign off, and I honestly can't remember. And I've got a pretty... No, I'm not going to say that because I'm not absolutely sure. I think that might already be in operation.
There is a version of it, yeah.
I think very strongly that we should not infantilize players. And at the end of the day, they're signing an employment contract. And they have some agency. Oh, here we go, agency, right?
Yep.
But in a different sense.
Yep.
They have some agency to read it, understand it, ask if they don't understand it, and then agree on its contents. I do think if you were working as anything else, once you should know what your employment contract contains.
No, I'm not saying that, Mark. What I'm saying is it's almost like a tax return. So you get paid 100k a year as a player, and then you get extra 20k in value, either actually in cash or gifts or treats or holidays or whatever it is. You just have to declare that at the end of the year. You declare it,
but the club has to declare that anyway.
Exactly my point. So those two numbers should match up.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got a feeling that might already happen now.
Yeah, and if it doesn't,
it didn't used to happen.
Yeah, and
I don't see that as an argument.
And if the player doesn't do it, or the agent doesn't do it, either the agent gets suspended or the player gets suspended, depending on if the player's employing an agent. It just gives an agent an extra thing to do, and also make sure the salary cap is absolutely bang on, because no agent wants to lose their job.
It's I'm not quite sure agents have been struck off in the past. And I'm not sure also, it's a tricky one, isn't it, that one, because some of the things that I know happened back in the day were financially quite complex.
Give me an example.
They involved a lot. Well, a lot of it was offshore.
Really? So that doesn't worry me from an agency point of view. That worries me from an HMRC point of view more than anything else.
Well, look. Since the days of Al Capone, the ones you were worried about, tax.
Oh my word! It terrifies me.
I also remember. Here's another one, right? This is just look. In a salary cap world, people are always looking into finding loopholes, right? Which then get closed. It's fair enough. It's a difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance.
Yep, quite right.
One's legal and one's not. But I mean, we got to the point in the mid-noughties when some clubs I know were saying to their players, and the agents were agreeing to it, and so were the players, for obvious reasons. They got more money. We're going to pay you 50% image rights and 50% salary.
Yes.
Now, because the tax rate on image rights is so much lower than you were effectively increasing their take-home pay. All right, they had to set up a little company, but all the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
I think there comes a point, it's not black and white. At what point do you expect a player in their 20s to be financially literate and well informed enough to understand the risk they are taking? And then, of course, that's why all the agents, and here you are, here's an argument that maybe says the value of agents. Most agents who agreed to their players to sign those kind of arrangements insisted the club took all the liability.
Right, good, nice. That's exactly what they should be doing.
Now, would the players have known that without an agent? The answer is almost certainly not.
No, that is good advice. That's very good advice. So, yeah,
as I said, things got really quite complicated at times. There was, because of course, HMRC eventually, through football, but then very quickly into rugby, because, they basically, and there's some very, very well-known cases in Spain particularly, but in the UK as well, in football, HMRC just basically clamped down on image rights contracts.
Yeah,
and
I remember
of course,
this.
You had to lodge them.
So I think the situation now... Go on.
We had always kept, at Quins, we kept ours pretty tight in terms of you'd never really... if you kept it to players who genuinely did have an image in your market, so let's say you could always do an image rights player contract for ongoing, but now let's say an image right contract for Marcus Smith, no problem.
Yeah,
right. He has got an image that has value in the English market, the British market, and as long as it's about 10-15% of the total, no one's going to quibble with that.
So 15% is the standard now, is it not?
Yes, ish. Once you get over that, you're starting to have to make exceptional arguments in exceptional circumstances. You could have made an argument for Jonah Lomu back in the day, and I think you probably would have won it.
Yeah.
You could have made an argument for Johnny Wilkinson. One of the real rarities, the outliers, yes. But, clubs back in the day were trying to make it for the reserve, the third choice hooker. I mean, he didn't have any images in his own street.
Nick Dolly with the image rights company.
It was just, anyway, it's all been cleaned up. Well, a lot of it's been cleaned up, but, it's got more professional. It's got the conglomeration, of course. The conglomeration of agencies has helped.
Yeah,
because you've got you've got bigger organisations. They've got compliance things to meet as well. It's a lot less Wild West than it used to be.
Are there any examples of particularly bad behaviour from agents which you encountered, without naming names?
Yeah. They would often, you'd say, you think you were absolutely close to a deal, and then they would literally ring up out of the blue and say, he's gone to Bath.
Oh, really?
And you go, all right, how did that happen? I thought we were, we'd agreed terms. Oh, yeah, well, it is, Mark, these things. They came in with a late offer. Absolute tosh, of course. He'd been the guy. And look, I never used to get disappointed. But did I ever really blame the agent for that? I sort of took the view that he was looking after the interests of his client. I mean, it damaged our relationship, and I was probably not prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt going forward. And that's an interesting one for agents to have to balance. And I know the players can be very critical of agents for this. And they say, well, at the end of the day, the agents want to do as many deals with that club. We'll have to deal with that club forever and a day.
Yeah, and
they don't want to upset them.
And there's only 10 DORs.
Upset them.
Yeah, and there's only 10 DORs really that can help you out, particularly if you're regulated by the RFU.
Yeah, so I know players sometimes think that their agents don't look after their own best interests, and I can see that argument because the agents have got their earning and long-term earnings to look about, and if they really piss off too many people who are the buyers, then your market is shrinking, isn't it? It's a fascinating area.
It is, isn't it? I find it one of the most intriguing areas of rugby. And actually, if you look at NFL, even I know who the big agents are in NFL, and they give interviews and they talk about the market, and I think it's a really interesting aspect of the sport which should probably get a bit more coverage.
But like everything else, rugby probably gets more coverage than its audience deserves, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know some big football agents, and we all know the bigger the sport.
Yeah.
But of course, and in the day, and of course and we all know the big agencies. Everyone's heard of IMG, although they're they don't call that anymore really, and they're a much more diverse company. But they started off, Mark McCormack back in the day, representing golfers. That's where it all started.
Is that where it started? Is it?
So, was Palmer and Nicholas and Player and the big three in the 60s. I'm showing my age now, I know. But sports representation, Tom Cruise et al. is the bigger the sport, the more money there is to be made. Therefore, the more people get attracted to it. And then, like everything else now, you've got multi-sport agencies who've got different divisions across huge numbers of sports.
Yeah, well, obviously
they share services like legal and financial advice and all that other stuff.
Well, the one I've got big reservations about how they handle themselves would be Rock Nation. I think there's something very, very suspicious about all that.
No, I don't know much. I know of them. I've never had any dealings with them, so I don't think they're very big in Fiji.
Really? Not yet?
Not yet.
Yeah,
but that's interesting. You see, you get agents who looking to place Fijian players in other markets, but they tend to have local reps, and then they refer off to their friends. I was talking to one local agent today about a player in France, and I said, you work at which French agent you work? We just both. I assume, and correctly, so I said, so which French agent you working through? Because he's based in Australia. We're in Fiji and the other players in France. So, of course, he's working through a French agent. He needs somebody. He needs a man on the ground.
Yeah.
Just like the man in France needs somebody with close links to Fiji.
Absolutely right.
There's a reciprocity of dependence there.
Is the NRL agency scene any different to the Premiership one? Is it more...
that's fascinating. Yeah. Very different. There's not much consolidation.
Why?
Because it's only one sport and one market.
Okay. Even though it's a bigger league and probably more the most successful
biggest rugby league in the world, club league by a mile. No, not by a mile. Top 14 is growing quickly.
Yeah,
but NRL is bigger.
So are you getting the same types of individuals as in the actual agents themselves? Are they the same type of individuals that are independent? Or is it a totally different type of individual because they are independent?
No, Australia is significantly more, until recently, very unregulated, which is a real contrast because the league itself is super regulated. Yeah. Not a lot of consolidation, a lot of family people. Excuse me. So, say one of the biggest stars in the NRL, Kalen Ponga, plays for Newcastle, wonderful player. Look, is represented by his father. That's not unusual. So no, because there's no international transactions, or very, very few. A few from Super League going to the NRL, but not many. There's the consolidation hasn't happened. Because you can be a rugby league agent in Australia, and as long as you've got a bit of coverage in New Zealand for recruitment, you're in the market. You know your own market.
I guess
you don't need someone in Japan. You don't need someone in South Africa. You don't need someone in France. You don't need someone in Italy. You just don't need that because there's no market there.
Unless you're doing like cross-code stuff, that's rare, isn't it? There's nothing really.
Not going to make a living out of that, JB.
No, you're not. Although I wouldn't mind being Sam Burgess's agent for a little while.
Yeah, I could tell you a few things about that, but I'd have to kill you.
Well, we'll take it offline. I think we'll leave it there, Mark. I think that was exactly what I've... Do you know what? The world has been crying out for an hour's worth of agency chat for decades now, so I think we scratched that itch.
Undoubtedly, it's what the punters are screaming for, I'm sure. This is the epitome of niche. But there we go. It'll appeal to to a small but select market.
Excellent.
And it's good.
Well, you're playing this weekend, correct?
Yeah, we've got the Blues in Auckland, but I'm going out Friday night because I have to meet the New Zealand Prime Minister on Friday morning.
Oh, wow. What's it's not Arden. Who is the new one now?
I will know his name by Friday, but at the moment I can't help you.
Is he a Conservative, or is he?
Yes,
yes he is, isn't he?
Yes.
The
Nationals are back in.
Oh well, I mean, next time we chat, maybe we can talk UK elections too, because that is equally as fascinating. Actually, it's not, is it? It's completely dull.
Now, it's an absolute foregone conclusion. The polls aren't going to move, and we will welcome the return of a government that might actually do something.
Do you know what? For once, I think we're agreed. The sooner this Conservative Party can be destroyed, so it can be replaced by something which is conservative, the better.
This is a very unlike a rugby podcast, but what the hell for 3 minutes?
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing is on this one is whether, in fact, the Conservative Party will be taken over.
Yes. I mean, fingers crossed, eh?
I think that's the big question. Will it actually? I mean, I think it's pretty well known, I'm a Labour guy and member, and I remember when we were infiltrated twice. I remember the 80s under Kinnock, and I remember the last decade with Corbyn and the Corbynistas and Momentum. And I used to say to my Conservative friends, who tend to be on the One Nation type, because you've got to draw the line somewhere, haven't you? And I said, why aren't you fighting? Your party's been taken over, just like mine was tried to be, by infiltrators, and you're just not doing anything. I didn't understand it, and I remember saying to a really good friend of mine about Tory, other than that, perfectly reasonable person, and sort of said, do you not think you're going to lose the whole party to the far right or the populist right? Not quite the same thing.
They're not the same thing.
No, they're not. I agree. One's nominally democratic and the other isn't. And they said it hadn't even crossed their mind. I think they've seen themselves as a natural party of government for so many decades now. It just doesn't quite compute that they're being taken over.
No, well, they have no ideology. They have no first principles. I mean, what we see now is just a pale impression of what the Labour government will be. There is no difference. And interesting.
I don't agree with that at all. But that's for another day. I think there's a world of difference.
I would be astonished. I'd be astonished if there is. What are they going to do? Raise taxes? I mean, what can they? Are Labour going to spend more? I mean, it's just ludicrous to think there's going to be any difference.
Well, we could start with basic competence. That would be a good start. How about that? Or
if you think
a real drive not to make political decisions for financial favours. That would be good. That doesn't cost you anything.
Do you know, if you think that the competence of the politicians, I mean, that we have are going to make a single bit of difference when most of the decisions now are made by fairly unaccountable experts and civil servants, you're onto a loser there. You're onto a massive loser.
If you've swallowed it's the bureaucratic elites that are the problem, there is no hope for you.
I don't think there is any hope for us, Mark, and that is the problem. I think we agree there. There is no hope.
See, I don't agree at all. There's always hope. Anyway, take care.
Yes.
And I will see you. We will talk again early in July when there's a new Labour government, which, a bright new morning.
Well,
things can indeed only get better.
And let's hope that they are successful. And until then,
it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. In all seriousness, it's a very, very, very difficult situation. But we shall see.
Excellent. All right, Mark. Well, best of luck in the playoffs, and I'll speak with you soon.
Thank you. All the best. Cheers, Sam.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Roundabout Season 2, presented by Nissan, is live now, and we're back to share more stories from the road and the memories made along the way. We're talking rest stops.
If we're stopping to get gas, you will be timed.
Misguided plans.
I grew up in the city, so I have a healthy fear of real extreme darkness.
A lot of laughs.
Y'all weird, but you were different.
And so much more. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.